Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Greetings. Little tech issue there. We got it all sussed out. We are live with the governor in deep trouble and a Congress that smells blood, baby. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz testifying before Congress right now about a major fraud scandal that allegedly siphoned huge amounts of taxpayer money out of his state. This isn't a friendly policy chat. This is lawmakers asking on the record who failed, who looked away, and who is going to be held accountable. Walz is trying to walk a tightrope between defending his administration and not looking like he's dodging responsibility. The question is whether today's testimony saves his political future or sets it on fire. So welcome everybody to the program. Come on in, come on in. We're going to jump into this pretty quickly. We had a little technical glitch there, but that's okay. Let's listen to Tim Walz, and we're a little bit behind this. But we're going to listen to Governor Walz, and then we're going to get into the rest of it. So let's go. Come on in, guys.
And now, okay, I'd like to recognize Representative McCollum for UC.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to, for the record, have a unanimous request put in with the statement. Thank you.
Without objection, so ordered. We'll now begin our questions, and Chair recognizes the Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Mr. Jordan from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor, why didn't you tell the truth? Why didn't you just tell the truth about the Feeding Our Future program? This program, my understanding, received $3 million the first year. Within a couple years was getting $200 million of taxpayer money.
Welcome, everybody. Come in, come in.
As the chairman said, auditors raised concerns. Everybody raised concerns. March 30th, 2021, the payments are stopped. And a little over a month later, the payments are restarted. Why didn't you tell the truth about why you restarted the payments?
Well, Chairman, we did tell you, and Feeding Our Future grew because of the pandemic. And
I didn't ask that question. I said, why didn't you tell the truth about why you restarted the payments? The payments stopped because there were concerns, obviously. It wouldn't stop the payments. Then they're restarted a month later. What was the reason for restarting the payments?
My understanding was the agency believed that the court had required them to make those payments.
And that was false, wasn't it? You repeated that. You said that, didn't you? You said the reason you restarted is because the court ordered you to do so. Is that right?
I don't believe that is settled yet, to the best of my knowledge.
Well, I think it is, because the court did something that I don't know if I've ever seen it. They issued a statement saying you were wrong in what you were saying. This is from the court. It says, Feeding Our Future versus Minnesota Department of Education, correcting reports and statements by Governor Tim Walz concerning orders issued by the court. Here's what the judge says. Governor Tim Walz told the media that the Minnesota Department of Education attempted in payments to FOF because of possible fraud, but that Judge Guthman ordered payments to continue in April 2021. Next sentence. That is false. So you said something that wasn't true. He further states this, Judge Guthman, the court says this, Judge Guthman never ordered the Department of Education to resume payments to Feeding Our Future in April 2021 or at any other time.
Thank you. Awesome.
So I want to know, why didn't you tell the truth?
Congressman, the attorneys at the Department of Education interpreted that differently. Both of those judges are no longer on the bench, and I think that interpretation...
The very first sentence, the first 7 words. This is not some unnamed source talking to the New York Times. This is not some anonymous source talking to whatever your Minnesota Star Tribune or whatever your paper is. This is the court speaking. First sentence, first 7 words. Due to inaccurate statements by the governor, Ramsey County District Court judge has issued and authorized this following news release. That's pretty straightforward. So the court's lying?
Good morning.
I can't tell you, Congressman, but the interpretation
Somebody's lying, because you can't say the court ordered you to restart the payments, and then the court says we didn't order you to restart the payments. So either you're lying or the court's lying. And I'm just asking you, which one is it?
I just simply know what the attorneys at the agency believed, that it was a misinterpretation. And I would note that those payments...
Could it be you were trying to hide behind the court, Governor? Could that maybe be the reason why you issued the statements you did and why the court had to do something you never see done before? They issue a press statement saying you're wrong. The governor is wrong. His statement is, their words, not mine, false.
Ouch.
Could that be the reason?
That was not the interpretation of the attorneys. And you know, court work, you can appeal those, Congressman, as you well know. I'm sure
Is it all about politics, Governor?
No, it's about taking care of our people, which Minnesota does better than anyone else.
$3 million. The behavioral intervention program went from $3 million to $400 million in 5 years. The housing stabilization went from $2.6 million to $104 million. The integrated community supports went from $4.6 million to $170 million in 3 years.
Morning, everybody. Come on in. Hit that like button.
What's happening, and you're trying to hide behind some pretend court order, some court order that didn't exist. Governor, who's Casey Magan?
I don't know who Casey Magan is.
Well, I'll tell you. Mr. Magan is a Somali American and a fraud investigator in the guy beside you's office, in the Attorney General's office. And here's what he said. There was a perception that forcefully tackling this issue might cause political backlash among the Somali community, which is a core voting bloc. Did that have anything to do with this whole fraud scheme that went on in your state, Governor?
It did not, Congressman.
It did not. So you're saying Mr. Casey Magan is lying too?
I'm not.
You're the only one telling the truth in the whole state. Mr. Magan, who's a fraud investigator at the Attorney General's office, says it's politics.
Yeah, Gus, it's...
I couldn't speak for Mr. Magan. You asked me a question.
I know.
It's a rough day for this guy.
I said no when you asked me the question.
I'm saying Casey Magan said just the opposite.
I don't know.
So the court's wrong and Casey Magan's wrong. You're the only guy right. How many people have been indicted in your state right now? Do you know, Governor?
I don't have those numbers with me.
You don't? 98 people been indicted. You happen to know how many are Somali American?
I don't. We don't investigate or prosecute people based on ethnicity, religion.
Neither do I. We shouldn't do that. But Mr. Magan is a Somali American who just said that the court, one of the concerns was this is a core voting block. And I just want to know if you know how many of the 98 people have been indicted in your state are Somali.
Hit that like button, guys. Good morning.
I don't. Their ethnicity is not my concern.
85% of the people indicted were Somali American in key voting block. And I think that's what
the
drove
files.
this whole thing. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Before I recognize the ranking member, it's my understanding, Mr. Biggs, you seek recognition.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have some uses. Here you go.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, our
clemency
text.
for convicted
You got that
fraudsters
right.
met with outrage. Next one. Biden's clemency and pardon list includes former elected officials. Next one. The drug dealers, thieves, and gang leaders granted clemency by Joe Biden. Next one. North Dakota judge blasts Biden for setting fraudsters free. Next one. Victims shocked after Biden grants clemency to kids for cash. Next one. Who has Joe Biden pardoned?
That's a lot of money.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair now recognizes ranking member Garcia from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank, of course, our witnesses again for being here. Now, of course, over the past 2 months, countless brave Minnesotans have shared their stories of heartbreak and violence and terror, not just with us in this committee, but with folks across the country. Peaceful protesters are being shot in the streets. Children have been snatched from their schools. People dragged from their cars and tackled at work. And we know that parents, of course, have been missing work and children have been missing school. Now, Reverend Tolgard, I want the country to really understand the effects on kids. Are you seeing families who can't go to work, who can't go grocery shopping, and who can't take their kids to school or the library or the park because they're terrified to leave their home? Are you seeing that?
This guy.
Yes, that's what we are seeing in Minnesota.
And this includes, of course,
Yes,
U.S. citizens, right? We're talking about also families, U.S. citizen families, and kids who are United States citizens. Is that correct?
Yes, people who are U.S. citizens and legal residents.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I want to just show this image here. This is an image of some kids, including, by the way, one of Liam Ramos's classmates. These are kids that are being held at U.S. detention centers and detention facilities. Now, Reverend Tolgard, when you'll walk us through specifically how Operation Metro Surge affected Minnesota's ability to investigate actual fraud.
Well, thank you, Congressman. Well, first of all, as I've said, we've been partners with the federal, our federal partners, whether that be the FBI or be the U.S. Attorney's Office, which I will note was one of the premier U.S. Attorney's Office, regardless of who they were appointed by. Right now, those lead investigators and basically that whole team has left that office. They've not been filled back in. The U.S. Attorney himself was in front of a federal judge yesterday on contempt issues of that office not working together. Now, look, we're going to prosecute, as we have, every single person that's involved in fraud, but we can't do it alone. The Attorney General's office is doing everything they can.
Hit that
He
like
has
button, guys.
consistently
Thank you.
come and
Hit
ask
the
the
like
legislature
button.
for more money,
Tap your screen.
more of the investigators he needs. But right now is the backlog at the U.S. Attorney's Office is being challenged by the federal courts. It makes it more difficult for us to get those cases over to them. But the good news is the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension is continuing to do those. We got a conviction this week. Those are things that'll continue on. And while we need to put in all the safeguards, we need to, as you heard the Attorney General's opening statement, if we partner together in this, our chance of defeating this fraud is that much higher. But right now, it's stymied. There's no investigators over there. There's no U.S. attorneys. The FBI has been decimated, and it's very difficult.
And that right there, the American public needs to hear. I mean, it's completely outrageous what's happened to those that are actually trying to take on fraud in Minnesota and across the country.
Thank you, Janda, for the 100 Jules marshmallow.
And there's no support, not acceptable. And Governor, finally, there appears to be actually no evidence that ICE and DHS reign of terror in Minnesota that continues has actually prevented any fraud. Is that your assessment, sir?
That's correct. What you saw on the streets didn't do anything to it. And we've actively asked if you have folks who can help us, if you have folks who are good at the forensics, if they can help us do this, we want you there, as we have for the last 7 years that I've been governor. We partnered together and convicted people.
Oh, he's been governor.
Thank you. And with that, I also, just for the record, want to introduce our report as well. Today, the Democratic staff released it as well as far as relates to this hearing and Operation Metro Surge. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair now recognizes our Majority Whip, Representative Emmer from Minnesota.
Thank you, Chairman Comer, and actually thank you, Governor Walz and Attorney General Ellison, for appearing before the committee today. Gentlemen, let's see if we can agree on at least one thing today. Today's hearing is titled Oversight of Fraud and Misuse of Federal Funds in Minnesota. Can we agree that this fraud is a serious thing, Governor Walz? Yes or no? Can we agree on that?
Yes, any fraud is serious.
Thank you. Because it's interesting that you and I agree that it's a serious thing, considering the man sitting next to you, your Attorney General Keith Ellison, just 2 months ago said, quote, "This is a political matter. This is not a serious thing," end quote. Attorney General Ellison, is there an organized crime ring operating in Minnesota? I'll answer for you, sir. Governor Walz believes there is an active crime ring in our state. In October, the governor said, quote, "We've got an organized crime ring in Minnesota. I think it's been going on for years." Moving on, Mr. Ellison, I, along with millions of Americans, have grave concerns over your alleged relationships with Somali fraudsters who have since been charged and convicted of federal crimes. I'm sure you are aware that over 90% of the defendants charged in the Feeding Our Future fraud case are of Somali descent. In fact, you have personal knowledge of these people. There's a 54-minute audio tape of your meeting with these criminals in December of 2021. And during your meeting, they complained to you about increased scrutiny of their nonprofits, and you told them, quote, "Of course I'm here to help," end quote. It's on the internet. Anyone can listen to you say that. Since then, you claim you were not aware of their crimes in the $250 million Feeding Our Future scheme, the largest pandemic fraud case in the nation. But just weeks after your December 2021 meeting, the FBI executed search warrants that you never would have requested in the Feeding Our Future fraud investigation. Now let's fast forward to September of 2022, 10 months after you met with the Somali fraudsters. Your office issued a press release stating, quote, "Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison and his office have been deeply involved for 2 years in holding Feeding Our Future accountable," end quote. So according to your office, sir, you have been deeply involved in the Feeding Our Future case since September of 2020. That actually sounds like you are saying that at the time of your infamous meeting with the Somali fraudsters, you were already aware of the allegations of fraud. When you had this meeting in December 2021, did you know, sir, about the long-running FBI investigation into Feeding Our Future? Yes or no?
Yes or no?
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Emmer.
Reclaiming my time. When did you personally become aware of the FBI investigation? That's all I'm asking.
Representative Emmer, as you know, I have addressed this issue many times.
All right. Reclaiming my time. In that same meeting with the fraudsters, Mr. Attorney General, you took aim at the Minnesota Department of Education. You stated that the Minnesota Department of Education had fought the nonprofit in very disgusting ways, in a very racist, xenophobic, and Islamophobic manner. You actually asked for the names of all these folks who are just hung up and offered to call the Minnesota Department of Education to, quote, demand some explanations. We now know that when you made these comments, the Biden DOJ was working with the Minnesota Department of Education and that their work exposed the massive fraud ring. Pretty bad look for you, sir. Either you were oblivious to what was going on under your nose, or worse, you were trying to obstruct the work of the Minnesota Department of Education. So I can see the time is getting short. Mr. Chairman, we are left with two questions. One, what did Governor Walz and Keith Ellison know about the fraud? And two, when did they actually know it? I would suggest that if they do not give direct and truthful answers to both these questions at this hearing, then they both need to be put under oath in a deposition. This is a serious thing, Mr. Attorney General. You are the only one who thinks protecting taxpayer dollars is political. Mr. Ellison, my concern is that you actively obstructed this investigation in exchange for campaign donations, a quid pro quo. If these concerns are proven to be true, you should be disbarred and you should go to jail.
Whoa.
I yield back.
Whoa,
Gentleman yields back.
Fired.
Chair now recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is critical that the federal government support people who need assistance with food, housing, and health care. Unfortunately, as long as the government provides these services, there will be bad actors trying to take advantage of them. We need to prevent and identify these fraudsters so that social services can reach those who need them. However, we cannot recklessly deny help to many people who need services because of a few bad actors. My Republican colleagues have now held 2 hearings to talk about fraud in one single state, but they have completely ignored the fact that the Trump administration is the most corrupt administration in history. If Republicans really cared about fraud, abuse, and holding criminals accountable, they would call them out. Donald Trump for firing 17 inspectors general. These internal watchdogs are the front line of rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse of federal agencies. The Trump administration has also retaliated against whistleblowers and allowed administration officials to engage in serious conflicts of interest that often cross the line into outright corruption. We need inspectors general, whistleblower protections, and rules prohibiting conflicts of interest to protect federal programs and make sure that people can get the services they need. Across the country, Americans are struggling to afford their health care, premiums, and groceries. The Trump administration should be strengthening the social safety net, not cutting the safeguards.
I'm sorry, but just listening to this lady speak and barely be able to read, this just shows you where the state of American politics is, ladies and gentlemen.
That catch
it's unbelievable.
The fraudsters taking advantage of it, and I yield back.
God.
Gentlelady yields back. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Governor Walz and Attorney General Ellison. My questions are going to be simple and
Wow.
direct. Governor Walz, you were inaugurated as governor on January 17, 2019, and have served in that role through 2 terms ever since, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
During the time period 2019 and 2020, while you were serving as governor, isn't it true that state auditors and officials raised concerns about fraud and vulnerabilities in programs overseen by your administration?
I can't confirm that, but I'm assuming we have always ongoing OLA.
I'll take that as a yes. Those warnings were communicated to senior officials in your administration, including yourself, correct?
Well, she can't read.
I
barely
can't
read.
speak if it was directly.
I think the correct answer to that would also be yes. Despite those warnings, you did not order a broad stop payment or suspension of payment in any program at that time, correct?
Put a 1 in the chat if you think there should be age limits to politicians being in office and making decisions for other people, for policy.
We're not going to stop payments of feed children until we have the proof that things happen. In 2019, we did start taking action. I went to the legislature.
Okay, Governor Walz, when fraud concerns were raised early in your tenure in the
Good morning,
Child
by
Care
the way.
Assistance Program, did your administration stop payments at that time?
DC in the House.
The Child Care Assistance Program and
The answer is no. When fraud concerns were
Would
raised...
you like me to answer or not, Chairman?
Well, it's yes or
I'm
no.
trying, I want you to help.
You've already answered the question. You said you didn't ever stop payments, and that's what the problem is, and that's what the Democrats are complaining about. Oh, my gosh, Trump stopped payments. Well, my God, you lost billions to fraud in Minnesota. That's what this hearing's
Mr.
about.
Chairman,
you didn't stop payments because you didn't want to rock the boat. And when fraud concerns
That's not
were
correct,
raised...
Chairman.
When fraud concerns were raised in Medicaid, home and community-based services, did your administration stop payments? No, you did not. When fraud concerns were raised in non-emergency medical transportation, did your administration stop payments?
Chairman, if I could mention what a stop payment meant by what the administration did last week is 400,000 children without health care. Are you stopping payment if one person?
We believe that's your fault and the Attorney General's fault, because you do nothing about fraud, even though everyone in America sees
our Medicare
with their
error
own
rate is
eyes
lower than your
the
state.
fraud. You have been defrauded. You have not been good stewards of the taxpayer dollars. And the Democrat position is, well, keep the money flowing. The American taxpayers have had enough.
I think that's a fair characterization.
They want their taxpayer dollars spent wisely. We all support social programs.
That's not a fair
to the vulnerable,
characterization.
but if you're going to waste the money to fraudsters, then we have to stop and recalculate.
We're not. We're putting them in jail when we can, Chairman. And some of these programs are crafted in such a way that there's a procedure to follow. And I'm with you. $1 is too much. I don't think there's a lot of difference here if you want to help us get at this. The question is it a sledgehammer? Is it a scalpel? I understand there's no political upside.
Well, let's get into what we've talked. You eventually did pause payments in certain programs, but that wasn't until late 2025 after the federal government stepped in. Is that correct?
I don't think that's a fair characterization of stepped in. We've been partners in this and working on them. But
let's move on. And that decision occurred only after large-scale fraud had already taken place for years. Now, Governor Walz, employees inside state agencies raised concerns about fraud and improper payments for years. Is that correct?
Inside agencies, we've been prosecuting them for years. Yes.
But they have raised concern. Agencies have raised concern about fraud in Minnesota, correct? For
Each
years.
of those, yes, when they do and they're prosecuted.
Some
yes.
of those employees faced retaliation after raising those concerns. Is that correct?
That is not correct, Chairman.
Okay.
Minnesota has strong whistleblower protections.
Attorney General Ellison, you are the chief legal officer of the state of Minnesota, correct?
Yes.
Your office advises agencies on compliance with federal and state law, correct?
Yes.
Retaliation against whistleblowers reporting fraud is unlawful, correct?
That is right.
At any point during your tenure, did you tell state agencies to stop payments due to credible fraud allegations, yes or no?
Sir, we prosecuted over 300 people in the Medicaid fraud area.
300, I would predict is a drop in the bucket, but you've never said to stop payments. That's
it's one of the highest rates in the country, sir.
Well, you have one of the highest fraud rates in the country in Minnesota.
That's not true. And my office doesn't have the authority to do a stop payment. We prosecute criminals when they're presented us by the agency.
So the answer is no, unfortunately. No one's ever from your office said to stop payments until we can get the fraud under control. So to summarize, you both knew about fraud, risk, and payments continued. Our investigation has shown that whistleblowers who were alerted about the widespread fraud were ignored, sidelined, and even retaliated against. Only after federal authorities ultimately stepped in did you take any action. It's not this committee's responsibility to decide guilt or dole out punishment. But it's clear there was a massive failure of oversight and, quite frankly, a failure of leadership. One wonders whether either of you should bear some personal responsibility for the billions of dollars siphoned off by fraudsters under your nose in the state that you led. Again, this isn't for the committee to decide, but based on your answers today and apparent failure to take any responsibility, still the answer to that question has become abundantly clear. And now
Mr. Chair, I seek unanimous consent to enter items into the record.
All right, before I recognize Mr. Lynch, Ms. Randall, you have a UC?
Thank you. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record November 12th, 2025 article from ProPublica entitled How Trump Has Exploited Pardons and Clemency to Reward Allies and Supporters, which shows President Trump rewards those in his good graces. I also seek recognition to insert into the record a Washington Post article from December 19th, 2025 entitled Trump's Pardons Wipe Out Payments to Defrauded Victims, which shows that President Trump lets criminals and fraudsters walk free. And I also seek unanimous consent to enter into the record an article from May 29th, 2025 from ABC News titled Trump's Flurry of Pardons Includes Some to Campaign Contributors.
And Miss Presley, we'll do one at a time. We'll go to Mr. Lynch, then I'll recognize you. Mr. Lynch from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor, good to see you, my friend. Attorney General Ellison, good to see you again.
We're right on the scene.
Thank you for your willingness to testify before the committee. I want to shift gears here a minute, and I want to focus on ICE. So I was recently asked to serve as the co-chair of the 5 for 26 soccer tournament. It's a global tournament, the largest sporting event in the world. And my home city of Boston has been asked to host a lot of the games. In Boston, we'll host teams from Morocco, Ghana, Bolivia, Iraq, Scotland, France, England, and Suriname. We'll also host over 3 million foreign national visitors who are coming into Boston for these tournaments. And we recently learned from the Trump administration that ICE will play a key role in the security operations during those games. So we've got all these people flying in, foreign nationals, a lot of different countries, South America and elsewhere. Governor, since you've had direct and relevant experience on dealing with the Metro surge and the security operations of ICE, I was interested in getting your thoughts and your observations and any recommendations you might have to help us with confronting our experience or what we expect to see during these games with ICE coming in as well as so many foreign visitors.
Well, as I think the world saw, and don't take my word for it, take professional law enforcement across Minnesota and across the country, the most unprofessional, aggressive force that I think you could imagine. And I was here in front of this committee and answered all your questions on June 12th. And I warned this committee what a masked group of folks turned loose in an American city could do. And I'm not, if I'm not mistaken, I said someone could get killed doing this. And I just want to be very clear about this. When Tom Homan had to come in to clean up the mess of Secretary Noem and Greg Bovino, Secretary Homan himself acknowledged Minnesota follows the law, exactly as I told you in this committee. So my advice to you, Mr. Lynch, is to get very public, upfront commitments from these folks. While I disagree with Mr. Holman's views on many things, he's at least professional enough that he pulled the leash back and pulled these folks out of Minnesota after, again, misrepresenting the number of people they were detaining, misrepresenting before he got there exactly what Minnesota did. And I'm just going to name it on accountability. The Secretary of DHS being chastised by Republican senators added insult to injury to Minnesota, pouring salt in the wounds of the parents of Alex Preddy and Renee Good's family by not even apologizing or acknowledging. And if you want accountability, for the one of the times, as far as I know, the attorneys know better, we are not being included in the investigation.
Don't spam the chat, guys.
And
thank you.
The actions that were taken of a gentleman who was shot in the leg was the night that Kristi Noem called me a domestic terrorist and said that this gentleman was attacking federal agents. Well, now we know the story. They lied. They are now under investigation, they being the federal agents. So look, I'm with you. I want your help on fraud. Why would I not want money to go to the programs I care deeply about, feeding people, clothing people, housing people? But what ICE did disrupted everything that we were doing. It disrupted our federal partners, and it forced our law enforcement agencies, who have worked hard to gain the public trust, to have the public believe in them. So my advice to you is, and especially when the world's coming to see this, let Boston's finest lead. Let the people of Massachusetts lead. Let the 10th Amendment stand for something and allow us to be able to do this. The people of Minnesota will hold us accountable if they don't feel we're doing a good enough job. But to demonize and retribution against a state, in the words of the president, in the words of the vice president, have done nothing. So, Mr. Lynch, the world should be looking forward to coming, but I would get it up front, and I would make sure that Boston's police department are in the lead.
Thank you. Attorney General Ellison, we need coordination between law enforcement agencies. This is a big job. What are your views on that likelihood of cooperation from ICE?
Well, I hope you get the cooperation that you need. In Minnesota, we don't have a good record of cooperation, which is interesting because so many times in the past, we have had great cooperation between local federal enforcers and local state ones, and we've just worked seamlessly. Nowadays, that has all changed, and that's quite unfortunate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back. Thank you for the courtesy.
Gentleman yields back. Ms. Presley.
Thank you. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a February 2026 letter from 200 state lawmakers urging Congress to exercise its oversight authority and demand the administration immediately restore full child care funding that it had frozen for 5 states.
Without objection, it's ordered. Chair recognizes Dr. Fox from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank our witnesses for being here. Governor, you've reminded people that you were here last June. At that time, I reminded you that the Feeding Our Future scam made Minnesota ground zero for the largest COVID-19 fraud scheme in the nation. $250 million in federal taxpayer funds were taken out of the mouths of hungry children, and as the FBI noted, they were, quote, funneled into luxury homes, cars, and lavish lifestyles while families struggled. You assured me then that you wholeheartedly supported the federal government's effort to bring those responsible to justice. I appreciate your sentiment, but a person's actions matter more than their words. Governor Walz, when did you first become aware of the fraud in Feeding Our Future? A specific date, please.
Well, Congressman, it's good to see you. And having served in your job for 12 years, I can tell you my job is a little different as governor. For 7 years, I take a lot of meetings. I certainly wouldn't specifically state, but I think during that pandemic, I think by late 2020, we started to see the irregularities. They were flagged. And I will note that we cooperated.
State officials were aware of the fraud in early 2020.
Jeez.
So you're asking when I, in my office, the governor became good, and I don't have a specific date.
Okay.
But what I would say is we provided witnesses documents to the U.S. Attorney and the FBI, and 79 of those people have been prosecuted going back to 2022.
Okay. Well, when I was chair of the Committee on Education and the Workforce, I issued you a subpoena in September 2024 because you and your administration were not forthcoming about how your administration, quote, failed to identify what has been described as the largest pandemic fraud in the nation, end quote. In September 2024, you were aware of the Feeding Our Future fraud and your administration's handling of it, correct? Yes or no?
2024? Yes, by that time we had already put people in jail and had extensively investigated.
This committee has testimony that the Minnesota Department of Education briefed your office about the Feeding Our Future's draft lawsuit and litigation hold on April 28th, 2020. Let me jog your memory. Is that correct?
I can't speak specifically to that. And if it's my...
It was April 2020. That means Feeding Our Future received a total of over $200 million in federal funds after you and your administration knew about the fraud concerns. Why didn't you stop sending money to Feeding Our Future as soon as the fraud concerns were raised?
Congressman, is following the program, we notified USGA under the Trump administration's first term. We notified them, too, because it's a program administered out of USDA, and they were working to work through the process. Eventually...
Didn't you say you were fearful of political retaliation?
No, I never said any such thing. I never said any such thing.
Well, that's what we understood. You were afraid of political retaliation. So, given the size and scope of the Feeding Our Future's fraud, I think you and your administration would have been on high alert looking for additional fraud in the state. But after seeing the handling of Feeding Our Futures and its $250 million in fraud, it came as no surprise to learn that even more staggering amounts of fraud, estimated at up to $9 billion, were uncovered in the Child Care Assistance Program, the Minnesota Medicaid program, and other programs. How could you allow such massive fraud schemes in your state to get to this point?
Congresswoman, we don't see anything by 9 million. Local press and everyone reports it about 300 million. But as I've said, if it's $1, it's too much. But we started in 2019 putting anti-fraud programs forward. After Feeding Our Future, we started going through and making sure every program had the integrity in it that it needed. And that's why you see convictions. That's why you see these programs
Why did it take nearly 7 years for you to get engaged to stop the fraud? 7 years.
We started in 2019, Congresswoman. It may be a surprise. If you arrest someone for stealing a car, other people are still going to try and steal cars. What we've tried to do is bring program integrity. But I'll go back to this. We're not going to shut down programs that have things that are going well in it, and we need to find that proper balance. And I've acknowledged that every year we're putting things in place. And Inspector
Governor Walz, you did not do your job. You did not do your job. You did not protect taxpayer dollars. You allowed massive fraud. You and Mr. Ellison allowed massive fraud to go on in the state of Minnesota. And it is unfortunate, as somebody said, that you can't be held personally responsible at this stage of the game. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair now recognizes Mr. Krishnamurti from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Governor Walz, you've seen firsthand the brutal excessive force used by ICE and CBP agents in Minnesota. Unfortunately, we saw the same tactics employed in Chicago during Operation Midway Blitz. I want to turn now to ICE and CBP's horrific pattern of abuse. Secretary Noem went to our cities ostensibly under the guise of arresting, quote, the worst of the worst. But in Illinois, less than 3% of those arrested during Operation Midway Blitz had criminal histories. In Minnesota, the vast majority of those detained had never been in trouble with the law, correct?
I believe that's correct, Congressman.
There were also more than 170 cases this year where ICE and CBP detained U.S. citizens. U.S. citizens should never be detained by ICE, correct?
That is correct.
I
would hope we all could agree on that.
Well, I hope so, too. According to the Chicago Sun-Times, federal agents have pepper sprayed children, including this 1-year-old baby in Chicago. And children should never be pepper sprayed, right?
I would hope we could all agree on that, too. They should not.
And according to The Independent, CBP agents dragged a 67-year-old.
When I was a kid, I probably should have been pepper sprayed a couple times. I'm just saying.
U.S. citizen out of his car, breaking his ribs and causing internal bleeding. No person should be subjected to that kind of treatment, right?
They should not, Congressman.
Attorney General Ellison, let me turn to another topic. In President Trump's second term, ICE has become America's highest funded federal law enforcement agency with a budget of more than $85 billion. If ICE were an army, this budget would make it the 13th largest army in the world. Let's look at where that money has gone. Last year, DHS spent $172 million on 2 private luxury jets for Secretary Noem. I assume you're not aware of a stop payment on that particular payment, right?
No, I'm not, sir.
Republican Senator John Kennedy yesterday grilled Secretary Noem about a $220 million ad campaign featuring her prominently, including on this horse in front of Mount Rushmore. Secretary Kennedy suggested this was wasteful spending, and I agree. I assume you'd agree with that as well, right?
I do.
This gross misuse of funds must end now, and Secretary Noem must be held accountable. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. Chicago was ground zero for Secretary Noem's overreach when she launched Operation Midway Blitz. Chicago media reported that ICE and CBP agents had pepper sprayed a 1-year-old baby, shot at a pastor, harassed seniors, tased U.S. citizens, and even killed a person. It's clear that Midway Blitz was never intended to make Chicago safer. In December, ICE and CBP began Operation Metro Surge in Minnesota. Over 3,000 agents were sent to one state. There were military-style raids at child care centers. Children kept home from school. Adults postponing medical care. In Minneapolis, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, both U.S. citizens, were fatally shot by federal officers. It's clear that Operation Metro Surge was never intended to make Minnesota safer. But this is not isolated to just Illinois and Minnesota. Inside detention centers across the country, the suffering continues. Detainees report physical and sexual abuse, medical neglect, and pressure to self-deport. On top of that brutality, Kristi Noem is misusing funds to buy herself private jets and enrich her associates. Kristi Noem is testifying in the House Judiciary Committee today, but she must come before this committee to explain the rampant corruption and waste within her agency. DHS is out of control. There is no congressional oversight. I was denied entrance to ICE facilities twice in Illinois. There's no accountability. Secretary Noem has still not appeared before this committee, nor has she responded in a substantive manner to more than 12 letters I've sent her. There are no consequences. Noem is still the leader of DHS despite regularly breaking the law and abusing her authority. Secretary Noem must answer for her wrongdoing. For Jaime, my State of the Union guest, who raises his little sister after his father was coerced into self-deportation. For Chicagoan Marimar Martinez, who was shot 5 times. For my constituent Evelyn, an 18-year-old U.S. citizen who was wrongfully detained by ICE. For Renee Good, Alex Preddy, and Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, and all the other victims of ICE and CBP. For the American people.
Thank Minnesota. As a Californian, as someone who grew up in Pennsylvania, as an American, for their character, for their courage, for what they have modeled in a multiracial democracy. And my question for you, I mean, having served as a congressman, a governor, what is it about Minnesota that we can learn? What is it that leads to this kind of inclusive feeling about immigrants in our nation?
Well, thank you, Congressman, and thanks for your work on many fronts. Look, I think Reverend Tolgard summed it up in getting at the heart of this. It's about the neighborliness and the care. And left to our own devices, I'm going to make the case, Minnesota, and by the way, I would remind folks, states have to balance their budgets. We're AAA bond rated, one of the states that's ranked the highest. We have a surplus, and we also have the highest rainy day funds, one of the strongest protections. So we understand fiscal responsibility, but we also understand this caring, this neighborliness. People saw their neighbor. I believe our politics can change with that idea of what the next door neighbor looks like. Now, I will have to tell you, Mr. Khanna, I was deeply concerned last year when the Vice President of the United States mentioned he can understand why people want to live by somebody who's not like them, which seems to go against our entire ethos in Minnesota, whether it was the first wave of Norwegian and Swedish immigrants that came to Minnesota, German immigrants like my family, or whether it was Hmong coming after the Vietnam War, or Somali and other East African immigrants to our country. And I think it's this sense of working together. There's a reason that we rank at the top in healthcare. We rank at the top in personal incomes. We rank near the top in home ownership. We rank near the top.
Hey guys, help out the stream and hit
this idea
that
that
like
we're
button
all
for
in
me.
it together, and that we believe everybody should have a chance. So I think it's an ethos, and it gets into our politics. on the secular side, I believe as an elected official that I shouldn't give a sermon, but I should attempt to live one. And one of our politicians, Paul Wellstone, talked about we all do better when we all do better.
Like
and
and
that's
subscribe.
what we do. And I know that is true to a certain degree in other states, but I see folks making the claim that, well, you wouldn't have any fraud if you just cut all these programs, if you just zeroed them out. That is true. If we did not provide food for our children, no one would steal from that program. But there would also be a lot of hungry children. And what I'm asking for and acknowledging the accountability, we need to put program integrity in. So I think it's a neighborliness. I think it's a historical point about caring for your own. And I think it's a clear understanding that if your neighbor does better, you're going to do better.
Well, thank you, Governor. And obviously, fraud matters and budgets matter. But what really matters right now in this country are values. And I really appreciate your sharing that. Attorney General Ellison, in the brief time I have, you know, I just want to be clear about Somali Americans, because when I was growing up as an Indian American, anytime someone who was of Indian origin did something wrong, every Indian American was concerned, you know, and I don't think people understand that. If you aren't a minority, how that makes you feel. I understand there were 80 or 90 people who were Somali Americans who were involved in this, but there are 100,000 Somali Americans at least in Minnesota. And statistically, from all the studies I've seen, it is just factually untrue that Somali Minnesotans or Somali Americans commit more fraud than white Americans or Indian Americans or other Americans. And could you just speak to this, because it is so dangerous? And I don't even think on the other side people are doing that on purpose. But if you aren't an immigrant, if you haven't lived that or a child of immigrants, you don't know what that makes you feel. And can you talk about the Somali experience in Minnesota?
No, the reality is the Somali community in Minnesota has brought great things to our state. They have opened businesses. They've gotten professional degrees. They are great neighbors who volunteer and help their neighbors. They have been a benefit to our state. If you pick out a few people who've done wrong, sure, you can do that, but I can guarantee you can do that in any ethnic group at all in the state of Minnesota or anywhere in America.
Thank you. Thank you both.
All right, before I recognize Mr. Higgins, I'll recognize Mr. Walkinshaw for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first, I just wanted to make
feelings?
a quick correction. You said Secretary Noem is before the Homeland Security Committee today. That's not true. I'm a member of the committee. She was with us a couple months ago, but not scheduled. With that, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a September 22nd, 2025 article from Reuters titled "Trump Aide Homan Accepted $50,000 in Bribery Sting Operation," which shows the Trump administration is willing to cover up blatant corruption of its officials.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair now recognizes Mr. Higgins for Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, ma'am, thank you for being here today. Governor, when you took office, this fraud had already begun. Is that an accurate assessment?
That's accurate, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Higgins.
So what we're trying to get our heads wrapped around here as a nation, and we're doing our best as a committee, I'm quite certain on both sides, to just sort of focus our attention on what needs to be focused on. You had massive fraud in the state of Minnesota. And when we started looking into waste, fraud, abuse, and theft across the country, Minnesota surfaced as a wow moment for the entire country. So naturally, we look as a citizenry to, well, who's in charge there? And my old friend, Governor Walz, is in charge. And the truth is fraud had begun before you took office. So it's a reasonable question, Governor. What you're noted in many interviews, I'm not going to go through them ad nauseum. You were aware of this level of fraud and investigations, and yet it seems like nothing was done until the Trump administration reestablished itself in a second term, and we began broad investigations into waste, fraud, abuse, and theft, and Minnesota popped. So would you please, I just give you a minute to respond.
Yeah.
Why didn't you do something sooner? I know some people were put in jail. I know there were investigations, but there was billions and billions and billions of dollars being stolen from a pretty concentrated demographic in your community. And this demographic is a significant political supporter for you and your party, good sir. So I just ask you, please explain.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mr. Higgins, and I appreciate your question in good faith on this. First of all, the issue of billions, and I'll keep saying this, $1 is too many. That number got thrown around. There's nothing behind it, but I will acknowledge $1 is too much. I will also note the characterization.
I would say it's slow. I would say it's slow, but continue.
Well, there's nothing to support that, but look, we will pursue it and assume that that's the case. We will still make the changes we need to make. The characterization that nothing happened until the Trump administration came in is simply not true. We worked with them in the first administration where USDA didn't take action, and I think that's documented. The fact is, starting in 2019, I went to the legislature asking for...
But you didn't pause payments, Governor.
The pausing payments...
And the criminal investigation, which I'm running out of time, I want to jump to. The way America sees this, Governor Walz, respectfully, sir, is that this money just continued to flow. There was a high awareness of this waste, fraud, abuse, and theft, like organized crime level theft, and it seemed to be slow rolled.
I think he's
and
just
nobody
warmed
stopped
up
the
here.
money from rolling in. And the money's gone, been remitted overseas. Attorney General Ellison, you stated in your opening statement that you sort of stated that your office only has direct jurisdiction over Medicaid fraud. Did you say that in your opening statement? Okay, well, you seem to indicate that you don't have, like, criminal authority, but you do, don't you? Under your own law, you have authority if the county district attorney asks you to get involved, or if the governor asks you to get involved, then your office can take lead on any criminal investigation, specifically if you have particular staffing and capabilities within your office, because it's statewide, to look into organized crime. Is that not correct? Okay, so you have the authority to lead your state's effort to respond to this massive fraud at the state level from within the healthcare realm, where government money is being stolen at very, very high levels, unprecedented levels in your state. Are you leading that effort for the state of Minnesota? You're addressing it. Are you leading it? Are you leading the effort?
Turn on your mic, dummy.
We are leading the effort to prosecute Medicaid fraud in Minnesota.
I'm not talking about Medicaid fraud. Don't hide behind that.
Oh.
You have the authority to prosecute anything criminally that the governor asks you to. And this thing is big. I'm giving you an opportunity, sir. Are you leading the criminal investigative effort into this massive fraud across the board in the healthcare spectrum in the state of Minnesota or not?
We are following the law. And
you are not leading.
Oof.
You're not leading.
Oof.
I'm going to say, Mr. Chairman, that the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota should resign.
Oh.
I yield.
Thank you. Gentleman yields back. Before I recognize Mr. Frost, I want to
hit the like
Mr.
button.
Waukesha, you were right. She's not testifying in Homeland Security. Kristi Noem's testifying in Judiciary. I knew she was here somewhere today, so you were right. I misstated the wrong committee. Chair now recognizes Mr. Frost from Florida.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I have unanimous consent called Fraud Focus. Why is Trump granting clemency to convicted fraudsters?
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you all for being here. The whole world has witnessed unprecedented and extreme immigration enforcement tactics this year in Minnesota. After the murder of Renee Nicole Good and before the murder of Alex Preddy, President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social that, quote, "The day of reckoning and retribution is coming." Governor Walz, the dictionary defines retribution as punishment inflicted on someone as vengeance for a wrong or criminal act. Based on what we've seen play out in Minneapolis, What is the problem with the President of the United States directing agents to carry out retribution?
Well, yeah, thank you. And this is certainly troubling because under the guise of fraud, which we all want to tackle, we were subject to, as you saw, the largest invasion of a state by the federal government, I don't know, in certainly any of our lifetimes. And that infliction, to me, we're trying to figure it out. Look, we'll acknowledge, and we're fixing it in Minnesota, but I'm telling you, each of you are going to go back to your state, and if some of you think you want to be governor, you're going to deal with this. And these folks keep moving. The problem is, Congressman, this was about retribution. This was about singling out Minnesota. And I think, I'm going to just name it, I think it's singling out because our state works, and it provides things for people, and we care, and we mind our own business, and we respect our neighbors. And this retribution had nothing to do with getting the worst of the worst. We know that. It had nothing to do with stopping fraud. And we were subject, we being Minnesotans, for over 10 weeks. And I want to note, just before, and I'll yield back on this, Congressman, I think this is important to note. The gentleman from Illinois noted that Midway Blitz, the damage it did to Chicago. There were 500 agents on the ground in Chicago. Kristi Noem testified yesterday there's still 650 in Minnesota. It is not over. This is not ancient news. This is not looking like everybody moved on. Minnesotans are still experiencing this.
It's bad for our communities. It makes our people less safe. It's terrorizing our streets. Yes. Reverend, what has been happening in your community when individuals try to record federal agents?
Thank you for your question. Individuals who have tried to record federal agents have been told they cannot. They have been asked for taken pictures of their license plates. They have been followed. They have been subject to fear intimidation tactics by ICE agents.
And one of the only reasons that really the world knows about what's going on in Minnesota is because of our Constitution and the right to be able to record law enforcement and federal agents. Those videos and the videotapes have been in part the reason why we know what's going on. Trump administration officials have suggested that observing or identifying federal agents is, quote, doxing or, quote, assault. We know federal agents have followed observers to their homes. We know protesters have been pepper sprayed. We know people have been violently detained who were filming them without bystanders having cameras who know how the murders of Renee Nicole Good and Alex Preddy by ICE agents would have been handled by this administration. They have already tried to lie about these murders, even with footage. After Alex Preddy was murdered, Stephen Miller said he was, quote, a domestic terrorist who tried to, quote, assassinate federal law enforcement. Kristi Noem said that he committed an act of domestic terrorism, and the President of the United States said that he was an agitator and perhaps an insurrectionist. Reverend, the last thing I want to get to that I think is really important. I grew up in the church, and I used to wear one of the What Would Jesus Do bracelets, mainly because I used to curse a little too much when I was little, and then I would, like, snap myself when I cursed. Either way, nowadays, I think less about what would Jesus do, and I think more about what would happen to Jesus in this country. And I just wanted to give you a moment to talk about what you think would happen to refugees Mary and Joseph as they come to our border. Would they be separated from their child? I mean, what does this look like?
Such a good point, Congressman. And yes, Jesus was himself a refugee, as were his parents. And yes, I fear that they too would have experienced the harm and cruel treatment that Minnesotans have been experiencing at the hands of our government.
What do you say to the people who hide behind the Bible and wrap themselves in the flag to say that what is going on in our country right now with ICE, terrorizing our communities, ripping our neighbors, ripping families apart? What would you say to people like that?
I think, again, Matthew 25, where are we in this moment? It should be on the side of the least, the widow, the orphan, the hungry, the homeless, and that as people of faith and moral conscience, history will tell what side we stood on, but our actions today will show true love of neighbor.
Thank you. I yield back.
Yields back. Before I recognize Ms. Mace, Mr. Grofman, I believe, has a UC.
Okay.
I'd like to submit for the record.
Hit the button.
I'd like to submit for the record.
Yeah, hit the button. Hit the like button.
Compliance report. on federally assisted programs for the year ending June 30th, 2024.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair now recognizes Ms. Mace from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for being here today. Governor Walz and Attorney General Ellison, you have presided over one of the worst government fraud scandals in American history. This was money intended to feed hungry children, help kids with autism, provide food and shelter and health care to the needy, and more. You both allowed billions in these American taxpayer dollars to be pillaged and plundered by Somali pirates. You knew this was happening. You chose to do nothing about it, and in some cases, you even enabled it. Attorney General Ellison, you even profited from this fraud by taking campaign donations from these Somalians after pledging to help quash the investigation into them. I find your behavior despicable. My questions this morning, my first go to Governor Walz, and I hope you learned some lessons from your last hearing with me on the Oversight Committee. Have you learned anything since
I did,
then?
that if I didn't speak up, 2 of my people would be dead, Congresswoman, and I warned you.
Okay, Governor Walz, what is a woman? Have you learned that lesson? Do you know what a woman is?
I'm the governor of Minnesota, Congresswoman.
Do you know what a
I'm not
woman
here
is?
to be your prop for your obsession.
So
I
if you
taught middle
can't
school
define
your
what
obsession.
a woman is, you certainly can't define what fraud is. If you can't even define what a woman is, you can't define fraud.
Wow.
How much money was spent on autism in Minnesota in 2017, Governor?
Wow.
I don't have those numbers in front of me, Congresswoman.
Did you prepare for this hearing today? Did you
I
do
did.
any
I
preparation
take
for this hearing
Congress
today?
seriously.
And you've seen the numbers about autism fraud in Minnesota. So we're going to do some Minnesota math with you today, okay? Are you ready? How much money was spent on 2017 for autism in Minnesota? How much?
I don't know. I wasn't the governor.
Okay. Did you not just say that you prepared for this hearing today? $1 million, okay? A quick Google search or using your AI could tell you $1 million was spent. How much money was spent on autism in Minnesota in 2024?
I don't have the number in front of me. As
Were you governor in 2024?
I was, but I'm not the
Okay,
head
so
of the
your
HHS.
excuse before that you didn't know what 2017 autism numbers were because you were not governor, and today you can't answer the numbers about 2024 as governor, and you still said you prepared for this hearing today. It's unbelievable. $343 million was spent in 2024. What percent increase is that from 1 million to 343 million? What percentage increase is that?
I'm not here to be your prop. Go ahead and tell me.
Are you governor of Minnesota or not?
Yes, I am. I'm
okay,
not.
well,
I'm
when
not
I'm
a prop
governor of
for a
South
member of
Carolina,
Congress.
you can sure as hell bet that I'm going to know the math. The math is 34,200% increase, an increase of 343 times what it was in this time period. Do you know the number of children in Minnesota?
I know that Minnesota ranked as a top 3 state for children
What is
in
the
the last
total
year.
population in Minnesota?
5.7 million.
Okay. What is the total population of children in Minnesota?
I don't have the number in front of me right
Are
now.
you governor of Minnesota?
I know 400,000 were cut out of health care last
Okay,
week by
that's
the
not-
actions you made.
Are you governor of Minnesota?
I am.
And you don't know the number of children residing
I don't have
in
the
Minnesota?
specific number. It's 5.7 million.
That's your total
What is your age?
population.
What is the age? 0 to 5? 0 to 19?
You have approximately 1.2 million children in Minnesota.
What
I'm
age?
not
That
even
like button
governor
for
of
me,
South
guys.
Carolina. Our population in South Carolina is 5.5 million. We have approximately 1.1 million children under the age of 18 in my home state of South Carolina, okay? As governor, I expect you to know this information. Thank God you're not vice president of the United States. Do you know approximately how many children in Minnesota
Shots fired.
are autistic or on the spectrum?
No, I don't have that number.
Okay, well, if you take the CDC's roughly 1 in 36 kids are on the spectrum, we're talking about approximately 33,000 kids. In South Carolina, it's about 31,000 or so. What is, do you know what this is per child, spending-wise, in the fraud for autistic kids in Minnesota?
Again, I'm not here to be your prop. Go ahead and tell us.
Is doing Minnesota math a prop? This is math. We're talking about fraud.
Minnesota ranks at the top. Where does South Carolina rank?
We're talking about money.
Where does
that
South
was
Carolina
supposed
children
to-
rank on healthiness?
These are my questions for you. It doesn't go the other way around unless
Wow.
we're debating on the debate stage. And we're not.
If you're asking
But
questions about being governor,
I'm
it does.
asking you
When you're
questions
governor,
about
you can
being
come and
governor
tell
of
me.
Minnesota, which you can't answer. This is basic math. And you can't even answer.
not
Do you
here to
even
be your
care
prop.
about kids in Minnesota?
They rank near
Do
the
you
top
care?
in every category. My children are fed. My
care
children
about
are
autistic
housed. My children
children
have
getting
health
the
care.
services they need in
My
Minnesota.
children have the best
Clearly
schools.
you don't. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady yields back.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Ms. Bobert? Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Ms. Mace.
May I make my two motions?
Proceed.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee issue a subpoena to the Honorable Pamela Jo Bondi to appear before the committee for a deposition regarding the department's handling of the investigation to Jeffrey Epstein and his associates and compliance with the Epstein Finance Transparency Act.
There you go.
Motion has been made. The committee will hold this motion in abeyance until the end of today's hearing. The committee will now proceed with today's hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee issue a subpoena to the Office of Congressional Workplace Rights for the awards and settlements paid pursuant to Section 415 of the Congressional Accountability Act prior to December 12, 2018, with only redactions allowable for the personally identifiable information of victims, alleged victims, and witnesses. Thank you, ma'am.
Hear, hear.
A motion has been made. The committee will hold this motion in abeyance until the end of today's hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, can I have one thing before?
Chair recognizes the ranking member.
Thank you. No, we'd just like to see Mrs. Mace's motions in writing, which would be great.
Okay. Now, before I recognize Ms. Lee, do you have Ms. Randall?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a December 11th, 2025 article from The Guardian titled, "Somalis Are the Scapegoat. Fear Rises as Trump Targets Minneapolis Community," which describes the Trump administration's xenophobic attacks.
Without objections ordered. Chair recognizes Ms. Lee from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the past few months, Democrats on this committee and in the Senate have been holding hearings on the unconstitutional actions of the Trump administration. So we've heard from, in that time, whistleblowers, industry experts, and survivors of abuses of federal agents. They spoke about warrantless searches that they have been subjected to, including federal agents bursting into their homes with guns. They spoke about being shot at and dragged out of their cars, and then, being made to look like they were actually the perpetrators. They spoke about federal agents' use of masks in unmarked vehicles, and the efforts of these agents to hide their identity to escape any sort of accountability. And we heard from the brother of Renee Good, who was murdered by ICE agents in Minneapolis. That is what oversight looks like. Not two hearings on fraud in one single state, which is not even the worst instance of fraud out there, though we all here agree that we should target fraud. Republicans have dragged Governor Walz in again to demonize and target his state because he is a Democratic governor and he is implementing Democratic policies. Republicans took a legitimate investigation and, as per usual, has made it a circus. Now we have just a random guy lurking around child care centers trying to get into buildings with children as the fraud vigilante. The Somali community has been vilified and made to feel unsafe. And federal benefits are being cut to Minnesota and other Democrat-led states. Trump and his administration also used this investigation as a justification for an immigration enforcement push that has created chaos and fueled violence and resulted in the death of American citizens. Reverend Tolgard, as a Minnesotan, do you feel that these oversight hearings and the Trump administration's fixation on fraud in Minnesota has made anyone safer in your state?
No, they have not.
Republicans have been touting alleged fraud in child care centers and the need to protect children. But since the immigration enforcement push, have kids been able to be kids? Have they felt comfortable going to school or playing out in public with each other or with their friends?
They have not been safe. They've not been able to go to school, to be in playgrounds, to be in libraries and places you would normally expect to find them.
Are you worried about the long-term impact of being surrounded by violence and uncertainty and what it could have on these children?
I'm deeply concerned about that, and I know that their teachers and their parents are as well.
You were arrested earlier this year while protesting ICE agents and deportations. Why was it important for you and other clergy members to speak out against Trump's administration's actions in Minnesota and elsewhere?
Thank you for your question. I was arrested along with 99 other faith leaders in Minnesota, many of whom could be here today, and we were compelled to action to stand on the side of the most vulnerable in our communities and those who have been facing enormous cruelty and unfair actions on the hands of ICE. And we needed to stand alongside them, as have many others in our faith traditions in history. We stand along with that great cloud of witnesses.
I want to thank you for coming in today and for, of course, having the courage to stand up to the attacks against your community. This, as we can all see, was never truly about fraud. It is a part of a greater effort by Trump and Republicans to gut social services, roll back civil rights, to villainize and make others out of people who they don't want to have and enjoy the same civil liberties and rights as others in this nation. They want to strip away and have been stripping away healthcare and education, childcare funding that millions of people rely on. This investigation and these actions have only been used to harm, not to help people. And rest assured, this will not stop in Minnesota, just as it didn't stop in Chicago before that or LA before that. This is a blatant attempt, blatant authoritarian grab that the Trump administration has been persistent in. It will come to all shores if we do not all take a collective stance. But more than that, urging my colleagues in the Republican caucus or conference to take up their job and their task as a co-equal branch of government. We do not serve as the lapdogs, as the cult followers of Donald Trump, of a president. When there are abuses or overreach, it is supposed to be us that takes a stand. And I would hope that at some point in the 119th Congress, some Republican with a gavel will do so. I thank you all for your time, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair now recognizes Mr. Donalds from Florida.
Thank you, Chairman. Governor Walz, when did you first receive notice of potential fraud in Minnesota's social services programs?
Social service programs in general. We knew that there was issues with the CCAP program as early as 2012, and my first days in office, we started taking action.
But as governor, when were you first notified?
Before I took office.
All right, Governor Walz, former Department of Human Services Commissioner Tony Laurie testified that you were aware in early 2019 of fraud in 2 Department of Human Services administered programs. Is this statement accurate?
Not that I recall. I'm not sure what he's speaking about.
You don't remember this meeting or this notification?
No, not specifically, I don't.
In March of 2019, your Office of Legal Affairs reported $5 to $6 million in alleged child care assistance program fraud. In April 2019, it was also reported that the Department of Human Services lacked proper integrity controls to control fraud. Were you aware of these reports?
Not specific reports, but because of that, my office, we put forward actions to address them, starting in 2019.
Is it correct that your administration was aware of the Feeding Our Future fraud as early as of May of 2020, based upon regular discussions about program irregularities?
I believe that's correct with the agency, the Department of Education, and then going back to USDA.
I'm gonna go back. Was your office notified of these fraud allegations?
Not me specifically, that they're handled internally in the administration. It happens every day.
Who was notified, Governor Walz?
The agencies do their work, the commissioners, and then if someone in my office was notified, they let me know. As governor, I make, 50 decisions a day. I said I did this job for 12 years. I make more decisions in a day.
Governor Walz.
So someone was maybe notified, but the agencies are the ones that take the action.
May I ask the next question? We have it under sworn testimony in the Oversight Committee that your former chief of staff was notified directly by these various commissioners about the fraud in Minnesota.
That could be correct.
So are you saying that your chief of staff didn't notify you?
I'm saying I don't recall whether he did at that time or not, but we took action. So I'm assuming when we put our budgets together, based on that, we put a package together for that legislative session.
Let's talk about budgets, Governor Walz. Feeding Our Future went from $307,000 in 2018 to $199 million in 2021. Are you aware of this increase in budgetary costs from Feeding Our Future?
Not specifically, but I know it increased during the pandemic.
The Housing Stabilization Services went from $27 million in 2021 to $105 million in 2024. Are you aware of this increase, Governor Walz?
Not specifically, but I know it increased.
Wow. Autism centers went from $24 million in 2019 to $342 million in 2024. Are you aware of that?
Not specifically again, but yes, we know the budget's increased.
Integrated community supports went from $4.6 million in 2021 to $170 million in 2024. Are you aware of that?
Again, not specifically on the numbers, but it's the budget.
Governor Walz, you have to submit a budget to your legislature every single year, like every governor has to do. If you're not aware of these increases, what was your office
Everyone
doing?
is balanced. My budget is about $72 billion. It involves 23 agencies.
Florida's budget's
6 million
$115 billion, sir. But what were you doing if you're seeing program increases like this amid allegations of fraud in your state?
Action was being taken on these starting back in 2019. If it's CCAS.
Can you describe the action that was taken in 2019?
Sure. In the 2019, I'll go to the first things that we did on child care assistance. We lowered the standards on proof of administrative fraud disqualification.
Whoa, you lowered the standards?
We lowered the standards for proof of administrative fraud. The standards where we had to prove it were so high it was impossible to try and do it. So we lowered what it took to show that fraud was happening.
And what did you do with the results of lowering the standards to prove fraud? What did you do?
Put 79 people in prison and.
But Governor Walz, the fraud continued to increase. It increased under your tenure. Do you acknowledge that?
Did the numbers increase? Yes. And I tell you, when you catch people and prosecute them, it shows up at the fraud increase. I would tell you, Congressman, because you're not hearing about fraud doesn't mean it's not
I got 50
happening.
seconds, Governor, and I don't want to get into a fight with you, but let me move quickly to the Lieutenant Governor. Peggy Flanagan's your Lieutenant Governor, is that correct?
That is correct.
Does the Lieutenant Governor go on the ticket with you, or are they elected by themselves on a ballot in the state of Minnesota?
It's on a ticket.
It's on a ticket. Peggy Flanagan essentially works for you.
She has an independent office. She's a constitutional officer. She's on the ticket, but she is independent as a constitutional officer.
You could ask for her resignation at any time. Is that correct? That's typically how it works with lieutenant governors.
Yeah, but she's a constitutional officer. I don't believe that's happened in Minnesota.
Peggy Flanagan is, there are accusations that she was intimidating whistleblowers. There was a meeting on April 12th of 2024 where she went on stage and publicly denounced whistleblowers in the state of Minnesota, calling them losers in their mother's basements. Is this the type of treatment that your administration allows for whistleblowers in Minnesota?
I'm not familiar with that.
Are you aware of any intimidation of whistleblowers in the state of Minnesota? There are 30 whistleblowers who have given letters to this committee on the record saying that they have been subject to intimidation by your administration because they were trying to stop the fraud in Minnesota.
I encourage them to go to the OLA and the independent sources in Minnesota that are
the OLA. You're the governor.
No, the OLA is the independent.
But sir, you're the governor.
Auditor.
Why don't you take responsibility for what's going on in your state?
We do take responsibility. None of those people. I'm telling you, I have no knowledge.
But you lost billions of dollars of American taxpayer money in the process, Governor Walz.
We prosecuted these people, Congressman. I think Florida has fraud.
I would argue that the prosecutions have largely come from the federal offices
that's
as
not
opposed
how
to the
this
state
works.
offices.
You know that we refer them
What do you
to
mean
them
that's not how it works? That's exactly
partners.
how it works.
They're partners. They partner together. They're BCA.
Is the Attorney General allowed to investigate fraud and prosecute fraud in the state of Minnesota without the Department of Justice federally? Are you allowed to do that, Attorney General Ellison?
Yes, and we do prosecute Medicaid. Yes, and we do prosecute Medicaid fraud all the time. We've prosecuted over 300 people.
Apparently not enough, because Minnesota's rife with it. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Randall from Washington State.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Governor Walz, Attorney General Ellison, and Reverend Tolgard, for being here to shed light on the impacts of the Trump administration's harmful actions in Minnesota, and frankly, to be pulled into some really ridiculous question lines. The escalation in attacks from this administration on social services programs in democratically led states like Minnesota, on the heels of the big ugly law's billions of dollars of Medicaid cuts last summer, is clearly devastating our communities. Do I believe Congress has a responsibility to reduce opportunities for misuse and fraud where we have seen evidence that it exists? Sure. That's why I introduced the Federal Program Integrity and Fraud Prevention Act, a bipartisan bill that would prevent individuals who have been convicted of fraud from applying for federal contracts. Mr. Chairman, if you are serious about addressing fraud, I'd love to see this committee hold a hearing on my bill, which was developed based on feedback from nonpartisan inspectors general, whose entire job is overseeing the appropriate administration of government programs. And let me remind my friends on the other side about Mississippi, a state with Republican leadership where over $77 million in temporary assistance for needy families funds were misused. One of the perpetrators of that fraud, former NFL quarterback Brett Favre, who received $1.1 million from the government for speeches he never made. Congressional Republicans'
That's a good
response
gig.
was to invite Farr to come testify before the Ways and Means Committee about how we should strengthen oversight of federal welfare programs. Because I'm sure he had some good advice about that. Meanwhile, my Republican colleagues are villainizing entire minority populations because of the actions of a few. We have a word for that. I also have a lot of Republican colleagues here who talk about being fiscally responsible and reining in federal spending. Again, I also believe we should be fiscally responsible. But to me, responsible governing means that we invest in transformative universal health care that saves us money in the long term. Childcare policies that give the budget back $7 on the dollar spent in long-term costs for the children who benefit. Policies that will actually save our country money in the long run and contribute to strong society and strong economy. Not slashing social services, not defunding hospitals, not eliminating childcare programs. Governor Walz, why do you think the Trump administration is so obsessed with fraud in Minnesota when its own agencies have found other states with even worse problems?
Well, it's a question we're all asking, Congresswoman, and I'd like to say, and thank you for this, I just want to make sure I go on record, Chairman Comer, in condemning the slurs towards my Somali community that the gentlewoman from South Carolina made. Thank you. Look, Congress, I don't know. I think it's been pretty clear the president does not like me personally. I think he continues to tell lies about our electoral system, claiming that he's won all 3 times when he lost all 3 times. I think he has people around him who were trying to find quotas around immigration, and they saw a perfect storm, if you will, that included some Somali folks and a whole lot, you know, if we're going to condemn folks, there's no Somali folks in the Epstein files, things like that, we know. But I don't know. It's an obsession, and I come back to it again. I think it's because we are so ideologically opposed to making children go hungry, people go unhoused. We invest in education, we invest in research, and we believe everybody has a place. And so I think it's just personal about how we do business.
Thank you so much. I could not agree more. There are also reports that as many as 50 prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office for Minnesota have quit in the last 12 months. They used to have 70 prosecutors. Now some reports say they have as few as 17. Many of those who left include the very same prosecutors who were prosecuting the Feeding Our Futures fraudsters. How has this flight impacted your efforts to fight fraud in Minnesota?
Well, it's made it very difficult. And I think for all of my friends on the Republican side, we welcomed the Republican folks, the attorneys over at the U.S. Attorney's Office who were good at helping us as partners. We turned this over to them. They prosecute, they put people in jail. They're not there now. There's nobody doing this. And I will remind this committee, the U.S. attorney was in front of a federal judge yesterday being threatened with jail because of what's going on in that office. And from my perspective, who's prosecuting trafficking, drugs, murder, and fraud? And so we want them. If you could do anything, Chairman, call the president in time to put some U.S. attorneys over there to prosecute fraud. I'll sign on with you.
Thank you, Governor. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair now recognizes Chairman Burchett from Tennessee.
Say that with disrespect in your voice, Mr. Chairman. Governor, you mentioned that President Trump lost all 3 times. I believe that's an error, and that's a conspiracy theorist. I believe you spoke in error there, but
no, he lost Minnesota all 3 times.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you corrected that.
He doesn't agree with that,
I don't care.
Chair.
We're good. Have you ever used taxpayer funds directly or indirectly to take action against individuals suspected of disclosing potential wrongdoing within a government entity?
I have not.
Well, almost 30 whistleblowers accuse you and your administration of retaliation. Would you say that's a conspiracy then?
I can't speak to what they said. I can tell you it didn't happen.
Okay. Are you aware of reports alleging state officials have engaged in retaliation against whistleblowers?
No, I'm not. Not specifically, no.
You're not aware of that when 30 have come forward?
Okay. I am not. I believe these are internet. We have options. The OLA, we have independent folks that they can come to, and I encourage them. It's against the law in Minnesota. I have executive orders.
It's against the law here, but it doesn't stop it. What actions have you taken to protect whistleblowers in your state, sir? And has anyone faced consequences for retaliation? If so, who?
Well, in Minnesota, we have nonpartisan legislative auditor. We have zero tolerance. The Minnesota Whistleblower Protection Act prohibits retaliation. I signed executive order in 2025, added protections. The law explains and clarifies protections around what reports are protected and who can report issues. They're strong. When I was here, I was an advocate for the IGs, and I think that's well known in my 12 years here that we need them.
Okay. Well, a whistleblower told our office that her supervisor at the Minnesota Department of Health and Human Services threatened to make her job difficult. And the supervisor that did that later received a promotion. Would that surprise you? And can you confirm if this account is accurate?
No, I can't confirm it, and I don't make HR decisions, but when I'm being very clear about this, there's a zero tolerance for whistleblower retaliation in Minnesota.
Can you, how can any agency combat fraud when retaliation goes unchecked?
It makes it more difficult. That's why we don't allow it.
Do you think that any the fraudsters sent stolen funds to Somali terrorist groups?
Pardon me?
Do you think that any of the Somali folks that received funds sent any of that money to any of the stolen funds to Somali terrorist groups?
There's been reports done and investigations done on this, and I don't believe there's any proof to support that.
Okay. Mr. Attorney General, do you recall a December 2021 meeting with individuals connected to Feeding Our Future, during which you stated there will be cases that you know, I want you to feel free to call me directly, and then I call up and what's the problem? And let me tell you, just letting the inquiry from AG is sometimes enough to make people knock it off.
Congressman, yeah, I was at a meeting like that. Let me just say that I've reported on this numerous times. I've been in front of a committee in the Senate. I'm here today. I was in front of a state House committee. This is a widely discussed matter, and I've been fully transparent. But let me just be clear. These people were fraudsters, as everyone here agrees. They were liars. They lied to me. They lied to courts. They lied to everyone. And I would like you to know that I do meet with community meetings all the time. I mean, it's a regular part of my job. Nothing unusual about me meeting with people. Nothing unusual about me telling people if you got a problem, my office will try to help you. But these people were liars and fraudsters. Okay. The main thing is I'd like you to know is that we're down so many federal prosecutors that it has put our ability to hold these people accountable.
Like and subscribe, guys. Hit that like button.
8-hour days do get long. In September of 2022, you issued a press release titled, "For 2 years, Attorney General Ellison's office has held Feeding Our Future accountable." Does that sound familiar?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. Let me tell you, the Department of Education...
Does it sound familiar or not, sir?
It certainly does. And the Department of Education...
How much did you receive in campaign contributions from individuals charged in the Feeding Our Future case?
Every campaign donation I got was returned to all authorities.
Okay. Everybody knows about the $250 million in fraud for Feeding Our Future case, which was prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota. But there were just 2 other large site sponsors that you settled with instead of prosecuting them. Why did you not prosecute Partners in Quality Care or the Gar Family Services?
Because my office doesn't have jurisdiction to prosecute in those cases.
Well, you allowed them to dissolve, but no one was prosecuted. And PIQC
they still may be,
sir, PIQC is accused of $300 million in fraud as significant assets, yet no charges and no attempts to recover taxpayer money. I'll remind y'all, $19 billion. I was a state legislator, and I can remember when our state budget was $19 billion. This is money that's been stolen, and it will not be recovered, and you all are to blame, and every dadgum one of you all ought to step down. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Before I recognize Mr. Bell, Mr. Donald, you have a UC?
Yeah, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an op-ed from the Minnesota Star Tribune, authored by Jim Nobles, the former
So has anything Tim Walz said today made you any more sympathetic towards them, chat?
Without objection, so ordered. Chair recognizes Mr. Bell from St. Louis.
Thank you, Chair, Ranking Member, and our witnesses for being here today. My Republican colleagues have called this hearing today once again to divert the public's attention from the dangerous threats that they themselves have created for the American people. They have
Over
chosen
300
to turn
people
a
in the building.
blind
Let's
eye
get some
to
more
the
likes on the board,
escalating public
guys.
safety
Help out
crisis
the channel. Hit
in
that like
Minneapolis,
button.
Minnesota, fueled by the deployment of ICE agents under the direction of President Trump. On December 1st, 2025, this administration launched Operation Metro Surge under the false pretense of promoting public safety in Minneapolis. Since then, we have witnessed several deaths, including the brutal killings of Renee Good on January 7th, 2026, and Alex Preddy only a few short weeks later on January 24th. News reports state that in 2026 alone, there have already been 8 additional deaths at the hands of federal agents. We are now living in one of the deadliest periods on record, with more deaths carried out by ICE agents in recent years than at any time since 2004. Under this administration's direction, masked agents have inflicted trauma that will remain in these communities and neighborhoods. There's a lack of accountability and justice. Survivor stories have been suppressed, false narratives have been told, and federal officials have refused to cooperate, even going so far as to block state investigators from accessing evidence. AG Ellison, as the chief legal officer for the state of Minnesota, what level of cooperation would you expect from the federal government during an investigation of this magnitude?
Congressman, I would expect the kind of cooperation that we're used to experiencing. I mean, in all of the time that I've even been a lawyer, which is now 36 years, state-federal cooperation was exactly how we did business all the time. We are very proud and we love working with our FBI agents, DEA agents, ATF agents. It's a regular thing. This is what's strange and unusual.
And has the lack of cooperation and unclear communication from the federal agencies undermined the investigations into the death of Renee Good and Alex Preddy?
It certainly has. We have been denied access to critical evidence in this case that we would need to evaluate this matter based on use of force analysis.
Which is befuddling to me because as a former prosecutor, I've led serious and thorough investigations in pursuit of justice. I can say that what we have seen by DHS, DOJ, and the FBI is the complete opposite of a detailed and thorough investigation into the wrongdoing of ICE officials. And let us be clear, despite what President Trump would have the public believe, those agents remain on the streets of Minnesota. These actions are not isolated incidents. We've seen similar events taking place across the nation in Illinois, North Carolina, and California, to name a few. We have heard directly from survivors about the cruelty and mistreatment they endured by ICE agents, and we have seen the individuals appointed under President Trump to head these operations evade justice and not be held accountable for their actions. We can't stand by and allow this to continue. Those responsible for these actions must be held accountable, and survivors and their families deserve answers and justice. Which is why, Mr. Chair, I move that pursuant to Clause 2, subsection K6 of House Rule 11, the committee shall subpoena Greg Bovino to testify before the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform.
A motion has been made. The committee will hold this motion in abeyance until the end of today's hearing. The committee will now proceed with today's hearing.
I yield the remainder of my time to the ranking member.
I'd like just to provide just a few of that time to the Reverend.
Already
I wanted to
has
make
over
some
30,000
additional comments
views,
about
guys. Hit
something
that
that was
like
said
button
earlier
for me.
in the
Let's
hearing.
get this out there a little more.
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just following up on Matthew 25, I am so proud of the countless ways that Minnesotans, Christians, and people of other faiths and moral conscience have stepped forward to show love of neighbor and to...
That allows people here illegally to get a CDL. That tape was in Missouri, not in your state. Look, if you don't want to protect the people in your state, I guess that's your business and the business of your voters. But that driver was driving in Missouri. And if
Everybody
he had
got
hit a
their
bunch
little
of
headphones
people,
on?
quite honestly, to me, you could have been held liable.
Yeah. Well, Congressman, first of all, Minnesota ranks in the top 3 safest states by highway data from your own department.
Highway data.
The data from the Department of Transportation for highway safety. We have the 3rd. We want everybody on our roads to be licensed.
So are you saying based on that you're okay?
I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with you or I speeding. I'm not okay with DUIs.
But you signed this law that allows for that. You signed it. And you're going to do nothing about it?
I can't speak to the specific on the CDL. What I can tell you is
I referenced your law. It says House of Representatives, State of Minnesota. And I know there's a lot of words here.
Case. I just know our roads are safer.
Exactly the sections that allow for this to happen and preclude federal enforcement regarding immigration and the illegality of people receiving CDLs under your state's
Driver
provisions.
safety and immigration are 2 separate things. Anybody, had that been a citizen or not, it's still tragic, it's wrong, we shouldn't do it. What I'm telling you is in Minnesota, we have the 3rd safest roads in the country.
So you're good. You're good with this practice.
I'm not good with that.
Well, what are you good with? Because that's what's happening under your law.
Well, I can't speak to the specific on if it's an outlier. We give license to people who then eventually... People get DUIs after we issue
That happened last month. This is March. That happened a week and a half ago.
Yeah, I don't know.
Are you familiar?
That's wrong. And look,
but you're not going to do anything.
Sure, we're going to do.
What are you going to do?
Traffic laws against them.
What are we going to do?
Was this person arrested?
I sure hope so.
Well, that's good.
And but he was licensed in your state under your law that you signed about a year and a half ago.
Every day we give licenses and people speed. So we ticket them and try and stop that. What I'm telling you is I don't understand the connection between...
He's here illegally. He can't read. And he got a license under your provisions, and he's driving all across the country, imperiling everybody else. That's the connection.
I can't speak.
Thank you.
The data shows Minnesota is one of the safest driving states in the country. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Perry.
Like and subscribe, guys. Like and subscribe.
California.
I'm first, sir.
Oh, you're
That's
next.
true, John Q.
Okay.
Is that okay, sir?
I didn't have it on the list, but
At the bell.
Oh, I should.
I will yield to the ranking member.
You can go ahead. I don't care.
You sure? Okay.
You can go ahead. I'll let her go.
Next.
I was tardy. I thank you, Mr. Minna. I thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, and thank you, witnesses, for coming today. So, what I've heard so far is feeding our future, $250 million stolen, 50 convictions secured, the prosecution was working, then the administration froze $10 billion in child care across 5 states, no evidence, no legal authority, no statutory process. A federal court ruled it unlawful and unconstitutional within 48 hours. Thank you, Attorney General Ellison and Attorney General Bonta, for that work. Then the lead prosecutor resigned. His team followed. Those prosecutions are now at risk. So the record shows they froze $10 billion illegally, lost in court immediately, and dismantled the prosecution, actually putting fraudsters in prison.
I got a little light sensitivity
Every single action made the fraud worse.
All these
This
screens.
isn't incompetence, because incompetence is random. This was targeted, legally defective, and prosecutorially catastrophic. If this committee was serious about fraud, the first witness should have been the HHS official who sent the letter, not the Attorney General who beat them in court. Attorney General Ellison, what are we doing here? And I want actually to ask you, what is your office doing systemically to prosecute fraud in the state?
Well, thank you for the question, Congresswoman. As I said, prosecuting Medicaid fraud is a very important work that we do. We do it every single day. We've secured millions of dollars for people. We've gotten millions in restitution. We've convicted people and held them accountable. We also represent state agencies and help those agencies support the work that they do. The fact of the matter is that this work we do to stop fraud is helping to protect public money. We're proud of it. And we also support federal prosecutions by providing them with information that they need to prosecute fraud, which we have done and will, of course, continue to do.
So, sir, tell me this. How has the ability to prosecute that fraud and social services programs been affected by this administration?
Well, it has been
people restrain
devastated
this,
by
that's
the
fine.
actions of this administration. This administration has cut the number of prosecutors, but also has redirected FBI agents to do immigration as opposed to
Why have they cut those prosecutors?
those prosecutors actually, I said cut, but they actually resigned as a matter of conscience because the administration was trying to force them to investigate the widow of Renee Good.
Say more.
So many of them said that they couldn't work under those circumstances because it violated their personal ethical requirements. So they quit.
So they left their jobs that they had sworn to do en masse because they were conflicted with conscience.
That's right.
Oh,
and may
boy.
I add, Congresswoman, that we have had motions to dismiss for the violation of a defendant's right to a speedy trial granted by judges in Minnesota because there's not enough federal prosecutors. And, one of those was a person who was a violent offender who was being prosecuted for felon in possession of a firearm. Case was dismissed because there are not enough people to perform the functions of prosecuting people who commit crimes. So this is having a devastating effect on our state. And in addition to all that, Congresswoman.
Well, so let me get this straight. Help me understand. 50 convictions
Mary.
secured. Additional prosecutions in limbo. The administration's prosecutors have quit because the staging of how this all works, they believe, and they have said on record, is immoral. Why are we here?
I've been wondering that, Madam.
Because aren't you saying that you would love for the prosecutions that are dangling in the wind, you would love for those folks to face justice?
Absolutely. Stealing public money is
So the ask would
repugnant.
be then to the administration for what? With this committee here, I think your colleague, or the governor of your great state, said you want more federal prosecutors on this case.
Yes, but it also, we should go back to the Hippocratic Oath of do no harm. I mean, it would be good to just stop doing things that shouldn't be done, such as demanding that prosecutors investigate Renee Good's widow.
Right. That's right. Well, I want to thank you all so much for coming today. And to the Reverend, I was able to come to your state briefly. And like one of my colleagues said, I did go by the site of Miss Good's death, and it was heartening to see the solidarity in your community. There were about 150 Christians reciting the Lord's Prayer over and over and over. You all are showing us what good really means. Thank you so much for being here today. Right. And I'll yield back.
Yeah, it's definitely
Good
fine.
yield back.
It's
Chair
definitely
recognizes
fine
Mr.
if people
Crane
restream
from
this channel.
Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our guests for coming today. I want to start with you, Attorney General Ellison.
Even if you barely have a
In an
dozen
interview
viewers,
with
if you
CNN
can't
host
get up
Laura
above a dozen
Coates,
viewers, go ahead
she
and
asked
restream
you
me. I hope
about
I can
whether or
help your
not you
channel
did
out.
enough to stop
That's
the
fine.
fraud. Do you remember that interview, Attorney General?
Congressman, I got to admit that I don't remember the details.
Can we
of
play
that
the
interview.
video, please? So, to refresh Mr. Ellison's memory.
Are we ready to? It may take us a second on that. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll just tell you what you said when she asked you if you'd done enough to stop the fraud, and she mentioned the $9 billion. You said, "Of course we have done enough. We're doing more every single day. This is a political matter. This is not a serious thing." Do you remember saying that, Attorney General Ellison?
I remember the conversation. What I remember was that I was lamenting the politicized nature of this very serious problem.
Well, you said it's not a serious thing. So now you're saying
fraud is a serious thing.
Okay, well that's not
Politicizing fraud
what you
is
said
not
on
a serious
CNN, Mr. Ellison. You said this is a political matter, and this is a quote. This is not a serious thing. So I notice you're changing your tune now that you're before the House Oversight Committee.
I would have to.
Do you understand, Mr. Attorney General, why this adds gasoline to the fire when Americans are so frustrated with this government for their out-of-control spending and the amount of money they pay in taxes, and then to see $9 billion of it, an estimate of $9 billion getting stolen of their taxpayer dollars and being used to fund cars and vacations and homes and even fund terrorism? Do you understand how statements like that throw gasoline on the fire, sir?
Congressman, I believe that you are mischaracterizing what I said.
No, I actually read you the quote. I'm not
And Mr. Crane, that
mischaracterizing it at all.
video's ready if you still want it. It's up to you.
Yeah, let's play it, please.
is that there has been hundreds of millions of dollars, but now there are some estimates that there could be $9 billion or more. And Noam was just suggesting they took hundreds of people off the street who were involved in fraud. Are you confident your office has done enough?
So we're a little bit behind this one, but I think what we can do is
this is a political matter. This is not
catch up a little bit here. I wanted to see some of the other
So how
testimony.
are you going to sit here, Attorney General, saying I miscarried
closer behind the live
determined there was fraud occurring because
now
of
that they are back from their lunch break?
incredibly large, implausible reimbursement request?
Well, I think at the time during the COVID pandemic, there was how these meals were being delivered and what safeguards, because as you know, the USDA changed the rules on these to make it easier for food to get out.
Yeah, but one of the
Now we are
fraudsters-
absolutely live.
fraudster sites,
Thank you for joining me, guys.
Safari Restaurant claimed that they served the same number of meals in 1 month as the entire St. Paul school district. In their transcribed interview, your commissioner of education said that this would be impossible. Governor Walz, you're an educator.
Let me catch it up a little more.
And so, Mr.
We're-
Ellison,
we're
I
back
just want
from
to
the
ask
lunch
you one
break.
question.
Exacerbated the fraud.
Oh, let's get up a little closer. Here it
They
is.
weren't doing their jobs. Is that correct?
What I stated is that people have been put into new positions, that we removed people from positions.
So you did not fire anyone.
People
You just
stepped away.
Shuffled the decks on the Titanic.
I think they left. They left state government.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Timmons and then McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Governor Walz, under your leadership, Minnesota has become the poster boy of fraud in America. Between the Feeding Our Future scheme were silenced years ago. It only stopped when you realized the fraudsters were drawing attention from people that you couldn't intimidate into silence. Fraud of this magnitude does not happen overnight. It builds slowly, and it's the result of institutional failures and poor leadership. So, Governor, my question is simple. If the buck stopped with you, as you said, who failed between 2019 and 2022, and why were they not held accountable?
Who failed in what, Congressman?
This fraud has been growing until recently, and you have been governor for many years.
No, well, thank you for the question, Congressman. And I would disagree with your characterization, obviously. And the legislative auditor, I don't know what the time period they investigated. Those usually come months after they did it. We took office in January of 2019 and immediately started acting on what the OLA, the Office of Legislative Auditor, independent branch, started asking us to do, where we started changing the programs.
That's not what the record reflects. The record reflects that there were all of these whistleblowers and they were being intimidated because alleged racism was the motivation behind the degree of enforcement.
Congressman, I've never got a chance to speak to these folks. What I will say is that in my time in Congress proved that I strongest whistleblower protections we can possibly have. We have plenty of opportunities.
We're not talking to every other state. We're talking to Minnesota because of the rampant fraud. So, look,
Is there no fraud in any other states?
3 members of the Minnesota State House of Representatives who all served on the Fraud Prevention and State Oversight Policy Committee gave transcribed interviews that confirmed that your administration was aware of the fraud happening in the state, yet chose not to act due to fear of political repercussions and intentionally silenced whistleblowers who have tried to come forward.
Well, that's
over 35,000 views so far on this live stream. Looks like we had a little bit of glitch there. Hit that like button for me.
It's a report, Mr. Chairman.
A YouTube glitch. That's all right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This report relays that several current and former Department of Human Services employees have described messaging from DHS leadership that emphasize compassion over compliance. So the former leaders have said that DHS should be guided by 70% compassion and 30% compliance. And then in 2023 DHS public presentation, leadership encouraged employees to embrace a 60-40 mindset. Again, that's 60% compassion and 40% compliance. I want to have as much compassion for people that need social safety nets. Like, I want to have 100% compassion, but we also have to have 100% compliance or work as hard as we can to get there. And as you sit here today, and after acknowledging how widespread and pervasive fraud is in Minnesota, how should your state employees prioritize program compliance? What is your message to people now relative to this compassion compliance ratio?
Well, I think I agree with you on this, Congressman. I don't think it's an either or choice. We need to make sure we're not going to stop these programs. We're not going to stop being the top state for children in the country, but we need to make sure if we're going to continue those programs that we need to have fraud prevention and program integrity in. So I agree with you. It's not an either or and it's not a percentage.
In order to give the benefits to the people that need them most, we have to be good stewards of tax dollars.
That's right.
And for every dollar that is stolen through waste, fraud, and abuse, that is a dollar that cannot go to people that need it most. So we need to prioritize compliance, make sure that we have the least amount of fraud possible. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
I agree, Congressman.
Gentleman yields back. Next is Mr. McGuire from Virginia, then Ms. Luna.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to our witnesses. Governor Walz and Attorney General Ellison, what year were you made aware of rampant fraud in your state?
Well, Congressman, I think
the committee has spoken to nearly 30 whistleblowers, most of which are current employees in your administration. Based on these transcribed interviews, you were both made aware of the rampant fraud in your state around 2019-2020.
Did they make
Governor Walz, do you know who Janelle Sky Hansen is?
I do not. I was going to ask you,
Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record article from CARE 11 titled CARE 11 Investigates Evicted Homeless Paying the Price for Minnesota's Fraud Crisis.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor Walz, Janelle Hansen, who goes by the name Sky, has autism. In June 2025, Sky, who was living in an apartment paid for by...
On the fact that your family then had ties to it as well, seems a little sus. Aside from that, though, you're telling the American people essentially that maybe you didn't know about it when dozens of your own employees were afraid to as being labeled as racist or as Islamophobic if they stayed silent. And so I just want to be clear about something. You've stated and you agree that anyone should be investigated based on, regardless of their background. But the fact is that your own employees came forward and were actually afraid of actually looking into that fraud because they did not want to be labeled as Islamophobic or as maybe xenophobic.
I mean, if you're the governor, you have to know the numbers in your
state. As politicizing the issue when $9 billion is not a political talking point.
When it comes to a key issue that you're testifying
about. The American people
about.
See what's going on, and this is fraud. I would say, and I would also advise the Attorney General to look into our criminal referrals. I do not believe that you guys could say that you didn't know what was happening because, frankly, even if, let's say, giving you the benefit of the doubt, you might not have known, you guys still chose to turn a blind eye to it. Thank you, Chairman. I yield my time.
Gentlelady yields back, and before I recognize Mr. Langworthy, our last questioner, I want to say Congressman Jack is on the Rules Committee, and everyone knows that they put in long hours. He's actually managing the floor. If he doesn't make it back in time after Mr. Langworthy, I want to put into the record Representative Jack is leading debate on the floor, but will submit his questions for the record. So with that, I recognize Mr. Langworthy from New York.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Governor, you have served as governor of the state of Minnesota for nearly 7 years. Why did it take you until 2023 to launch an investigation under an inspector general into this massive fraud that's been uncovered?
I don't believe that timeline's correct, Congressman. As I said, we were
get your notifications also, guys. I'm going to be doing some war coverage
these cases have been about
in a couple hours.
But your administration did hesitate for years to fully investigate this fraud. Was it because you were concerned about you're the de facto leader of the Democratic Party in Minnesota as governor? were you concerned about the political consequences within the Minnesota Democratic Party's voter coalition? Is that did that lead to you making that mistake? Because trying to listen to the answers today and come up with a conclusion as to why you would turn a blind eye to this for so long, when so many people from your partners in government across the aisle, but also people at the street level, saw this fraud going on in plain sight.
Well, we did not, and I know that the rest of the country saw this recently. And what I would ask you, Congressman, is what benefit would there be to that? Just assume there's no ethics involved, which I have a long history here of doing that. There's certainly no benefit in taking money from programs that I've advocated for that make Minnesota the best state to live. And so we worked it from the beginning. And look, these folks continue to move. They're a moving target. We went back to the legislature asking for more tools. We went back last year and asked for more tools. And now what's great is Republicans are actually supporting those things that we put forward. So as soon as
Governor, Republicans came to this committee last month and testified the fact that they've been trying to get people's attention in power in Minnesota for a long time.
I would disagree with their characterization.
Well, so you state that unequivocally there is no political consideration based on constituents in the Democratic Party.
Absolutely
that you
not.
turn a blind eye.
Absolutely
now
not.
That's interesting, that Governor, because your first reactions in December 2025 were to call taxpayer conspiracy theorists and dismiss concerns about the $9 billion in fraud as white supremacy. And on December 23rd, you stated, this is what happens when they scapegoat, and this is what happens when you no longer hide the idea of white supremacy. You immediately went there. And
I believe I was speaking about the ICE invasion in Metro Surge. I'm unfamiliar with where you're quoting from.
This is when this fraud was uncovered. Knowing now that those people were correct, would you apologize to those constituents for classifying them?
I'm unfamiliar with what you're asking for. I've heard today attacks on the Somali community that I would view as racist trope thrown at the Somali community.
Okay, Governor, I understand you need to deny and deflect, and your stories are pretty legendary at this point. But while you were looking the other way at fraud that took place on your watch, you and your ticket mates in the Democratic Party in Minnesota get somewhere between 80 and 90% of the vote in Somali-heavy precincts. In your election, re-election, the gentleman sitting next to you won his last election by a mere 21,000 votes. It seems to me, in conventional wisdom here, would be that you were willfully ignorant to these crimes in return for a community support.
That's totally false, Congressman. That accusation is totally false. I won by, 10 points, hundreds of thousands of votes.
He won by 21,000.
But that accusation...
So it looks like we had kind of a glitch come through here, and that is quite all right. So what's going to happen here is I am going to dip out. I'm going to be back on a little bit later. I hope you guys enjoyed the stream. This is just going to be more of the same, denials, accusations, just back and forth. It's the political game. So I'm going to be back on in a little while with some Iran coverage. The truth is a moving target, guys. Thank you, mods. Thank you for all the support. Thank you for the likes, and welcome new subscribers. Hit those notifications, and I'm going to be back on in a little while. I'm going to see you on the next one. Thank you.